middle of the year, and Qualcomm always leave a little gift before vacations. And this year was important, the update of their smoldering hell, called the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, which promises to solve the main problem of the original one, excessive throttle thanks to the heat it generates. And the only one to tame that old Snapdragon was the Redmagic 7. So today, we will review its newest iteration, the Redmagic 7S Pro, who supposedly solves the main complaints of the previous one, and finally includes the possibility of fully utilizing an external screen. Welcome back, I'm Claudio, and this is Zero to Tech. Not so long ago, we were fighting with the Galaxy S22 and its Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which gets so hot that, without additional cooling, it hardly outperformed CPUs from 2 years ago. And Qualcomm knew it had a problem. Manufacturers were hysterical. So, this new version promises 10% more performance, but most important, 30% less power and heat. How did they do it? Changing the manufacturing from Samsung to TSMC. And to get the most out of it, what better for testing than the newest Redmagic? That is the new version called the 7S Pro. It updates the CPU and other specifications to claim the crown for the most powerful. And the truth is, after the Galaxy disappointment, I had to try it. Especially because it finally brings features that makes a lot of difference. The box is very similar to the previous model, with its color shifting and comic-like graphics. And it includes the same: the box with the pin, the manuals and the phone case, the 65-watt charger, and the cable to charge it, which is red, USB-C to USB-C, and very good quality. The overall design also remains the same, but this time we have the new Mercury color, which I would simply call white, and I like it much more. The lighter color better shows the icons and signs under the glass. It has a more industrial or robotic tone, which stands out. The cooling plate and the frame have a plain aluminum color. The rest is the same. On the right side, there is the power button and the volume rocker, a microphone, the triggers, and the fan outlet. Below we have the speaker, the microphone, the USB port, and the SIM tray. On the left side, the game switch. And above, a speaker output, a third microphone, and the headphone jack. Everything a gamer needs. Now with the specs. We have the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, but naming only gets worse. But in benchmarks, we see there is an improvement. 6% better in Geekbench single core and 11% in multi-core. In Antutu, also 6% better, which now passes more than 1,100,000 points. In Wildlife Extreme, with the scores above 2800, between 7 and 8% better than the 7 Pro. And it continues with the stability that makes it better for gaming. The highest temperature after running the stress test was 43 degrees, compared to 51 of the regular Pro. This is a 16% difference. In short, Qualcomm promises are excessive, as you might expect, but it's an important leap, especially because less heat translates into better performance for longer. The screen is the same one, up to 600 nits with HDR support, and looks amazing. It's not over 1000 like Samsung, but if you don't have them side by side, it is impossible to tell the difference. My only issue is that when you turn it on, it takes a long time to adjust the brightness. This is more because the screen occupies almost the entire front, so the camera and the sensors are behind the screen. This version has 18GB of RAM, which I think it's excessive, and 512GB of UFS 3.1 storage, with chips that go over 1200 megabits per second. Both the screen and the glass on the back are Gorilla Glass 5. The cameras also remain the same, main wide with 64 megapixels, ultra wide with an 8, and a macro with 2. Of all those, only the main one is acceptable, with good photos and video even at night. The ultra wide needs a lot of light for the photos to be good, and the macro is more a filler than useful. The front camera is 16 megapixel, but it's behind the screen. This makes the photo look washed out. If you need good cameras, this is not your phone. It comes with Android 12 and Redmagic UI 5.5. It's very simple, but it has all the features you expect on Android, just without all the extras from other phone brands. It is simple but functional. Its true power is in the game mode, which we will talk about in the next section. And now, the elephant in the room, the battery. The reason I didn't keep the original 7 Pro is that it has some problems. At night, I lost more than 10% battery without doing anything, and when playing, it fell into a tailspin. You couldn't expect more than 3 hours of gameplay. This one has no problems. It goes all the night without losing even 1%. I don't know if the problem was only with my 7 Pro, but from the comments on Reddit, I think it was more common than Nubia accepted. In short, they solved my main problem, which is a strong argument to keep this one. But let's see what makes this phone even more special. Let's start with what's notable at first glance. What stands out the most as part of the design is that it has air inlets and outlets. This is because the phone cools the CPU with a fan, which, in some versions, is visible from the outside. Thanks to this, it can hold maximum performance without losing stability. And the best part is, it's RGB light, which we all know translates to more frames. Next up are the digital triggers, which works like shoulder buttons on a controller. Here, they can be seen because they are different color from the frame. When configured, they map to touches on the screen and work like physical buttons, while doing everything else on the touchscreen. And speaking of touch, it has a reading rate of 480 or 960 Hz, so there is no excuse when you miss a shot. Monster that doesn't use controllers. Finally, we have the famous Redmagic switch, which makes you forget it's a phone and turn it into a gaming console. It changes the interface to one focused 100% on games, gives you additional information like playtime and specific settings when you are playing, and lets you see what each of the different plugins does. And when you start a game, you have access to the sidebar, which has functions to change the CPU mode, screen speed, show game statistics, start recording, disable message, calls, and much more. An important one is to activate the battery bypass, which allows you to be connected without using the battery, extending its life. On the left side, we have more options such as setting the triggers and activating plugins. So far, everything is really the same as the regular 7 Pro, but you can also connect it to an external USB-C monitor or with an HDMI adapter, so you can use it as a console with a Bluetooth controller, without additional latency. The problem is that this mode respects the screen ratio of the phone, leaving you with 2 black bars that don't fill the entire screen. But now, Nubia made an important change. You just need to turn on gaming mode, and immediately, the screen changes to a desktop mode with all the games using the entire screen. Now, if you have a mouse and a keyboard, either Bluetooth or USB, you can map it as touches on the screen. And it works well. We tested it with Call of Duty Mobile, and although we have to make some adjustments to the sensitivity, it almost feels like playing on a PC, but it does have its issues. First of all, you need the keyboard and the mouse. Something as obvious as using only the controller doesn't work. It sometimes sends the buttons command, like here, where you can open the last game, but it doesn't do anything else, and when you jump into the game, the buttons work, but not the sticks nor the D-pad. So, games that use the controller cannot be played in this mode. Also, you can add apps to run them in full screen, but in our tests, this never worked well. It's not like Samsung DeX mode. So the usefulness of this mode is limited to games that uses touchscreen. Too bad, but this is all software. Hopefully, Nubia will adjust these issues to make it more useful. Now let's see the performance. We started with Apex Legends, which we haven't seen in a long time. We set the phone in balance mode, then turn up the graphics to the max, and we started testing. And perfect. The game runs at 60 frames without problems and no slowdowns. And don't worry, you can play all the time you want. It won't slow down because it doesn't get too hot. So we started very well. To continue with shooters, the next one was Fortnite. We cranked the graphics all the way up to 60 FPS. Still in balance mode, we have some drops frames, but never below 40. We can raise it to the rise mode to make sure it stays at 60, although the battery consumption at the temperature increased. It is not excessive like the temps we saw in the original Redmagic 7. Now the last heavy hitter. Genshin Impact. We tested it in balance mode and with Mantis to map the controller, with graphics to the max and 60 frames, and it holds 60 all the time. This one in balance mode. The only issue, it was that suddenly there were some weird pauses, or some texture disappeared. We thought it was because of Mantis, but after I stopped recording the screen, these issues disappeared completely, which reminded us of the detail we got with Aether SX2 on the 7 and the 7S Pro. There, when we started recording, the framerate fell to the floor. So we jumped to test A3X2, where we were able to get God of War up to 4x and more smoothly, with small slowdowns on the transitions, but noticeable only with the FPS counter. But at 3x the experience is completely smooth. In Ratchet & Clank the performance was not so good, 3x with constant slowdowns, but at 2x it runs perfectly. And yes, the recording problem continues. Nubia is doing something wrong, and the worst part is that in the past videos they told me they were already working to solve the problem. And here we are months later with no solution. This only happened to us in A3X2, where it is unusable, and in Genshin Impact, where it causes the details, but not often and hard to notice. We then tried GameCube with Dolphin MMJR, and we were able to get Automodelista up to 3x and run perfectly. Even at 4x it's playable, but with the slowdowns in those tricky areas. Of course, simpler games like Mario Sunshine or any of the two Zeldas can be played at 6x without any problem. For Wii, you can play the easiest ones at 3x, but heavier games like Smash Bros. Will have slowdowns in some menus. At 2x, you won't have any problem running the entire library. Playing PSP, I went to the extreme with 10x upscaling on God of War, but it doesn't have enough power. We went down until we reached 8x, and at this resolution it runs perfectly, so any other games like GTA or anything else will run, which is quite amazing. And yes, we tested all these emulators in balance mode, no rise mode required. To finish, we tested 3DS with Citra MMJ, where we tried Street Fighter IV first, and there is no problem in going up to 4x resolution. Just like in Smash Bros. For the Wii, you can see some slowdowns in the menus, but as soon as the fight starts, no slowdowns. In Mario 3D Land the same. At 4x, it has the typical slowdowns of the game, but this happened at any speed, and they are minimal, hard to notice if you don't have the frame counter. As expected, the performance is impressive, but being realistic, the performance we had in games is not better than those on the 7 Pro. The benchmark shows a 10% difference, but in games it's impossible to notice, especially on emulation, where we had more or less the same results. Maybe a few other emulators could use the extra power. And now, one of the least expected surprises, the price. With more power and more RAM, they could raise the price, but the Obsidian version, which has 12GB of RAM and 256 storage, costs only $720 USD, less than the previous model. And the version we reviewed is $900, exactly the same price. Of course, with the new models, the vanilla version's price fell, and while most features seem like simple head turners, something that we cannot deny is the performance, much better than the competition. The only one that competes is the ROG G6, but it needs an external cooler to reach the same level, and it costs almost twice with similar specs. To finish, there is still a lot of potential of what Nubia can do with the HDMI connection. Hopefully, they iron out those details with the controller so it can really work more like a Switch, and let the hardware live to its full potential. Click the link to see the review of the previous one, the 7 Pro, or the playlist for all the phones we have reviewed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, retro games, modern technology, zero to tech.